Healthy relationships don't just happen, they're practiced. And today I want to show you exactly what that looks like. Stay tuned.
To the secret formula of femininity for women who want to live a more feminine, fun, and fabulous life. I'm Dr. Nicole Montero, your host on this weekly journey to unlocking your inner radiance, nurturing fulfilling relationships, and becoming the best version of yourself.
I want you to think about the healthiest couple you know, not the one that's always posting vacation pictures or the one that everyone seems to envy on Instagram. I want you to think about the couple that when you spend time with them, you quietly think to yourself, I want what they have because it feels so beautiful and so connected. I have a question for you though. Do you think that they just woke up like that one morning and they just simply found themselves in this amazing, healthy relationship? Or do you think that they became the kind of people that could co create that relationship together? I think the way that we answer this question changes everything. I feel like along the way of talking about relationships and what we want, we have been pursuing a fantasy. We've been taught that we should spend all this time, years sometimes, searching for the right person. And then we spend very little time thinking about or practicing how you actually create or build a healthy relationship. And as a psychologist and relationship coach, I've worked with so many couples and women who feel like once they found the one, they just sit back and relax, and that everything would just naturally fall into place. And then they're surprised when things feel difficult or not so easy all of a sudden. But the opposite is true. Healthy relationships don't just happen, they're practiced. And today I want to show you exactly what that looks like. Stay tuned. We're going to dig in. Welcome back to another episode of The Secret Formula of Femininity. I'm your host and guide on this journey to tapping into your feminine essence, Dr. Nicole. One thing that psychology teaches us is that relationships aren't built in singular big moments. They're built over time in those repeated, sometimes seemingly small moments. Your brain and your nervous system don't automatically trust because someone says, trust me. They trust because someone shows up over time and because you show up over time. So, in the previous episodes, we've been talking this season about how do you become your best self? How do you understand what compatibility looks like? What are your standards? How do you find that right person? But today we're going to talk about what do you do to continue to build and practice actually a healthy, fulfilling relationship. And I say practice because it takes showing up again and again and again. And it also takes leaning in and working with and practicing with your partner, even if it's imperfect, even if there are moments of conflict and of not really seeing eye to eye. We're not talking about chasing perfection. We're talking about practicing fulfilling, healthy relationships. And one of the things that I've learned over time is that every small interaction builds on the one before it. So when there's small evidence that the person you're with can repair, and then you do that same thing, and by repair, I mean, what do you do after there's a dust up or after there is a conflict? Every small step towards repairing or coming back to each other, those are the practices that end up building the beautiful garden of a relationship that you want. And I think so many women would feel more at ease if they understood that healthy relationships don't become healthy overnight. They become healthy one small interaction at a time. Let me share a story about someone that you may be able to relate to. I'll call her Michelle. She came in to see me because she was convinced that she had married the wrong man. Something had happened, something had shifted, and she's like, why do we argue all the time? This is really upsetting me. And when I asked her, I started probing and wondering about what happened after the arguments. She was like, well, what do you mean? We argue, and that is the evidence right there. And I was like, well, after you argue, what happens next? What is the next step? Then in the next hour, in the next day? And when she thought about it, she was like, well, he actually comes back, he apologizes, or he makes some sort of overture or extends an olive branch, and we end up talking. Sometimes we laugh, but the arguments themselves are what are so distressing to me because I don't like to be in that kind of conflict. And I was like, I chuckled a little bit, and she's looking at me like, okay, Dr. Nicole, what's going on? The thing is, so many women like her think that conflict means that the marriage is failing, especially when the marriage or relationship gets to a different stage. And so there may be conflicts that weren't appearing before, or important issues or differences that are showing up that weren't there before. So naturally, there's going to be some conflict. But that's not the issue at all. The conflict isn't the problem, it's about the repair. And from what she was telling me, there was plenty of repair happening. In fact, it seemed like the more conflict there was, the more space or opportunity there was to repair and therefore get closer. So she didn't really recognize that they were actually practicing the things that were creating a stronger relationship in the long run. See, I want to clear up this misconception or myth that I hear over and over. And I used to actually believe it myself. And I used to actually believe it myself. It may surprise you to know that it's not conflict that predicts the health of your relationship. It's what happens after the conflict. It's the repair that predicts the health. So I want us to have a relationship reframe. Yes, we need to reframe some things with our thinking because it's those thoughts and it's those unspoken beliefs that we don't even recognize that end up sabotaging us getting closer and being able to create a fulfilling relationship. So the reframe is I want you to challenge this belief you might have. So many of us think that good relationships, healthy relationships, happy relationships don't have problems. And part of that is because we don't share, it's not shared. We see the Instagram moments, we see the Disney fairy tales, we seek the happily ever after. But we need to reframe that there's no problems in healthy relationships to understand that healthy relationships are where two people have learned to return to each other after the conflict, after the argument, after the problem. So instead of constantly being outward, looking in opposite directions, they're able to turn inward and look at each other. And that is the healthy return that we need to learn to seek out versus seeking a completely conflict or problem free relationship. Now, I know I've talked before about how some of us chase the chaos because it feels like chemistry and we want the ups and the downs and the arguments and all of that stuff that just feels so intense and exciting. Well, there's another group of us, though, that seeks out the path that's so smooth, there's no tension, there's nothing ever wrong, there's no problems. We think that that is what is satisfying to us. And both of them are actually the extremes. The middle way is the way where we can invite that conflict and we even see it as a way to get closer and more intimate. And then we're able to build from there versus thinking everything has to be perfect and we feel like we're in this glass house that we can't move or feel free in. And let me tell you, glass houses crumble very easily, obviously, because they're so fragile. We're not trying to create glass houses here. We're trying to create strong, sturdy, and flexible foundations that allow both people to grow. Mm. Yes, we need a hand clap for that one so we can remember that reframe. So let's talk about some practices that can help us to shift that belief and actually get into how we water that garden and build that healthy relationship. So the first practice is not really something you have to overdo or exhaust yourself trying to put all of this effort into. Because that's something that I see with so many women. It feels like, oh my God, I'm working on myself. I got to do my communication. I have to, oh my gosh, it's just so exhausting. And it's like, no, the whole point of leaning into your femininity is to stop putting so much pressure on every single thing. Fall back and sit with yourself. So, that first practice that goes along with that is staying curious. Curiosity says, let me understand this a little bit. Let me not just jump to conclusions. Let me try to see this from another perspective or really try to understand it first. It means just being curious and not thinking you have the answer. On the other hand, defensiveness is the opposite of curiosity. It is so easy to get disconnected from our curiosity, which is a natural part of our femininity. It's when we feel like we have something to prove or we're trying to overprotect ourselves and not get hurt. And then we get into defensive mode. And it's like, okay, I need to explain why I'm right, why you're wrong, why you hurt me. How dare you? The curiosity builds intimacy, but the defensiveness and the trying to prove and protect yourself, it actually builds distance or more walls. Now, listen, ladies, I 100% understand why so many of us are in that space. I'm not saying that that defensiveness and putting up walls just comes out of nowhere, but I am saying you have to pivot and practice a whole different way of engaging and leaning into your relationships. And that's where that reframe comes in. So if you think about it, a relationship is trying to build a bridge. And sometimes that means being uncomfortable. Sometimes that means zipping your lips, not saying anything, and taking the time to be curious and try to understand why your partner sees the thing or is reacting completely differently than what you thought. That also means putting aside some of the labels and the negative self talk that we are all taking in this current relationship space. So you might have to combat those thoughts that, like, here we go again. I knew no man could show up for me. Or, see, I knew it. Everybody I know is in a horrible relationship. Real relationships don't exist. All of these negative thoughts play into you being more defensive versus being curious. So that's the part where you sit with yourself, you allow yourself to feel uncomfortable, and then you get real curious about your partner and what's going on with them. So, practice number two is about being swift with your repair. You know how we talk about try to be slow to anger? Well, sometimes it just doesn't work, right? Sometimes we get mad and we realize, you know what? I don't I want a redo. And the way you have a redo is you become quick to repair. You see, we have to understand that we don't get brownie points for being right if while we're doing that, we're damaging the relationship over time. There's no big logbook in relationship heaven that's going to then give us brownie points because we were right and we got to prove our point, right? So when you're quick to repair, it's really about putting that ego aside. Ego can be that thing that we're trying to protect, or we're trying to save face, or we're just trying to make sure that the other person knows that they're wrong. You know, I talk to so many people that have a level of anger and resentment within their relationship. And it doesn't mean that none of it is valid. Anger can be a really important emotion that gives us information. But if we find ourselves constantly in this cycle, we're resentful, we think that the problem is the other person, they're wrong, they need to change. Side note, a lot of times we are trying to love the other person how we think they should be loved. So if they're more laid back and distant and not very talkative in the midst of conflict, we want to shake them up and say, "You need to communicate. You see, you're being unhealthy. I need you to tell me what's going on." When you find yourself doing that, it's like, okay, we need a timeout. Pause, take a step away, and see if there is any space for a repair. And you know what? I know, ladies, we love to talk. We are verbal communicators, a lot of us, but sometimes the repair is not even words, right? Sometimes the repair is walking past and a touch on the back of his neck, or a slight handhold, or asking, or what Gottman calls the bids for repair, like asking, hey, do you want to eat something? Or you okay? Or just a small gesture that says, I'm trying to return back to you despite the space that we were in. And you know how the old folks say, never go to bed mad? Well, I would change that a little bit and say, never go to bed without some form of touch. Even if you are so mad, put your foot on his leg. Let him lean towards you. Hold each other's pinkies. Like sometimes you are so mad, you're like, I don't even want to see this person, right? Now, for some people, that leads to exciting intimacy because they were so mad and it's like, okay, let's make up. But for some people, they get so in their feelings and so resentful that they just want to be separate. And I would say repair doesn't always have to be words. It could be those little things that say, hey, I'm ready to connect and come back together. It's those bids for connection. It's like saying, hey, I want to move towards you. And I guarantee you, for most people, when you do that, they want to come closer too. So I just wanted to make that clear that not every repair is about this huge apology and violin song, but it is about pushing the ego down a little bit and trying to see how we can come just a little bit closer together so we can get that repair going on. Because nobody wants to be constantly feeling resentful and angry and feeling like the other person is so wrong. And practice three is protect the friendship. Research consistently shows that one of the strongest predictors of relationship satisfaction, long term relationship satisfaction, isn't romance, but it's friendship. Are you still able to enjoy each other? Can you laugh together? Do you like that person? I mean, okay, let's take a pause. You don't have to always like each other. There are going to be these seasons where it's like, okay, this person is truly working my nerves. You guys could be going under stress, financial stress, career stress, building a family, small kids. So it's not like you're always going to be in this lovey dovey space, but you do want to water and nurture that friendship because passion changes. And even more than that, relationships go through stages, especially if we're talking about building a long term committed relationship. There's, of course, that excitement stage. And I think so much of us, so much attention is put into that. And that is lovely, right? But it's like with anything else, that excitement, once the novelty wears off, it's not going to always be at the same level. And then there's the trust phase. It's like really getting to know each other. And then it's like the life stage where there could be stress. Once you're together and you combine and you build this life together, that can also bring stress. So that is a season of a relationship. Things like kids, things like finances, like I said earlier, moving, just different stages of your personal development where you are. And then there could be something life throws wrenches all the time. It could be grieving. It could even be grieving, even if it's not something that happened externally, but just grieving that you all are changing or you're no longer in that initial excitement stage. So, and then throughout that, you want to think about like, how can we keep choosing each other? How can we keep turning to each other? What can we do to nurture that friendship? And I know a lot of people like to prescribe things like, okay, you have to do date night every week or every month. You have to do this number of vacations. You have to have this number of family meetings. And I think all of that is well and good, but it's very individual. It depends on you as a couple and what's going to work for you. So it's not so much about the strict rules, but it's about what you're trying to nurture and water as you practice this healthy relationship. And in so many of my past episodes with guests who are in a relationship or who are relationship experts, one of the things that comes up is having a purpose outside of you as individuals for your relationship or your marriage. Are you building for a shared purpose or reason? Whether it's spiritual, religious, whether it's building family or building legacy or just valuing what it means to have this connection with another person. And it's that purpose, like we talk about with so many things in life, that purpose is so important because it's like a North Star that you have to keep looking forward to when things get rough and when you go through these different seasons and stages of your relationship. Now, I want to take a moment and just ask you to pause. Don't think about your partner. Don't think about your ex or relationships in the past that didn't work. I want you to take a moment to just think about yourself. Ask yourself, how do I respond when I'm disappointed? What do I do when I'm misunderstood? Or what happens when I don't get my way and I'm put in a position of feeling really uncomfortable or rejected or abandoned? And think about these reactions and habits that you have in these situations. Do these habits that you act on help love to grow or do they make it harder? These questions are exactly why I created the Damsel Me Please journal. Not because I want women having another pretty notebook, although it is very pretty, but I created it because all of the insight in the world doesn't mean anything if it just goes in one ear and out the other, if it fades. I created it because insight and knowledge and information fade if we don't interact with it. The reflection is what changes us. And one of my favorite prompts from the Damsel Me Please journal asks you to honestly look at yourself, the habits, the beliefs, and the patterns that you're actually bringing into your relationships. And that is so important because we're not trying to have you become this perfect partner. But what is key is awareness, self awareness of your own patterns and what needs to change. So if this episode has you thinking, I really need to do some more self reflection, spend some time with myself, either before I get with someone else or while I'm in this relationship, then I think you are really going to appreciate the Damsel Me Please journal. It's now in print form, no longer just digital. So I'm going to leave the link in the show notes below. So I want to share one other story with you. I know I talked about the first woman is like she was so scared that her relationship was in a bad place. Well, I want to tell you about a couple that I met years ago. They had just celebrated their 40th anniversary. And we love to come up and ask these couples, so what's your secret, right? And I love talking to the older people because they have some gems to share. And a lot of people expected them to say, like, communication or prayer, keeping God first, or our date nights, or reconnecting after our children left. And all of those are so important. I wholeheartedly believe in them. But what the husband said was so profound and even deeper. He said, we never stopped choosing each other. That simple phrase right there. We never stop choosing each other. And that stuck with me because healthy relationships aren't built on one big decision. Just like a healthy garden isn't built on one rainfall, one day of rainfall. Healthy relationships are built on thousands of small decisions and interactions and repairs. And that's good news because it means it can be practiced over time and that one mistake isn't going to destroy it. You need to see my garden. I've been pretty busy, so there's some weeding that needs to take place. But do you think because I missed it 1 or 2 days, now the garden is destroyed? I've laid the foundation so I can easily go back and do the repair. And it's the same in our relationships. It's choosing those small actions, choosing patience, choosing kindness, choosing to let ego go, choosing to repair in whatever way we're capable of, even if it's not a grand gesture, choosing to be curious and put our own perspective to the side, and choosing to come back even when we've been disappointed. I want you to remember healthy relationships aren't found, they're practiced. And every practice is another opportunity to build the kind of love that brings peace and bliss, not only passion. Thank you all so much for joining today. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, the notification bell so you don't miss an episode. Check out the link for the journal if you are looking to do some of this deeper work. And of course, if you want to learn more about my inner circle, the Boundaries to Bliss Society, where women like you learn to lean into their femininity, practice healthy boundaries, and build healthy, fulfilling relationships. The link is also in the show notes. Until next time, stay soft, stay curious, stay feminine. I'm Dr. Nicole.